Hello everybody, welcome to Gelvin Valley Farming Simulator 15 once more. We are trying to conclude the planting process, and we've been in the middle, I'm almost out of fuel, of putting some barley onto this slope. And kind of like I mentioned in the last video that we had, I was going to do a little bit of homework following that episode, which I did, and I just double checked some figures in right before coming on to this episode here to see if I am planting the right crops. And I gotta say, I'm kind of mad at myself because I feel I have planted basically all the wrong stuff. It's really interesting when you dig into, and some may kind of consider this cheating. I don't know what I consider it. Looking into the tables, the information tables, data tables, whatever you want to call them, underlying the game, as they give clues as to how the game values the crops and whatnot, that it has in the game. They all need a starting point. For example, the game tables need to say when a player harvests this little spot here, this pixel in here, how much is he going to get? Well, actually, I say pixel, it's more like a square meter. I think that's kind of how everything is figured, is in terms of square meters. And then it's going to key off of, there's going to be a certain yield, and kind of like I was explaining in the last video, I think those are pretty well set in concrete, and there is very little that you can do to modify it other than whether you apply fertilizer or not. So if you apply fertilizer, you get a better yield than if you don't. But otherwise, I think the result is basically the same. So for each one of these crops that you can put in, or fruits, whatever you want to call them, you're going to have a certain yield. That's kind of set. The amount of fertilizer that you put on it is also set. And the cost of it, is going to be the same no matter what crop you're doing. So the same amount is going to be applied. So these are kind of constants. That there's going to be different seeding rates. Some of the underlying game tables have different rates of seeding, and that's kind of nice to have a little bit of variability there. So, one particular crop may require you to put in more seed than another. But all of the seed costs the same. Seed is seed is seed. So that part isn't constant, nor is it realistic. And then inside the game, it does offer, on this particular map, you have several locations at which you can sell stuff, and each one of them, back here in this version of Farming Sim, in the mapper could determine certain sales modifiers, if you will, on each particular crop that could be sold at that location. So if a particular location wasn't really intended to be a major spot for wheat to be taken to, maybe you could penalize the price at that location or something like that. Unfortunately, I don't think that system worked very well. I think the intent was that you could somehow produce variability in pricing in the locations, and it indeed is variable, but the trouble is the variability is constant. I know that sounds kind of moronic to say it that way, but what it means is that you're going to sell certain commodities at the same place every single time, because it's always going to have the highest price relative to the price of that same commodity at any other locations. And that's no different here with what Wild Wild West put into the map. Certain locations, are going to be more hampered. You're not going to want to take crops to it. Basically I've determined that if you want to sell uh, barley or wheat, you're always, pretty much always going to take it to pheasant pluckers. Maybe there's one across the way, maybe at the farm shop. I can't remember what the modifier is in that one. But basically, you know, as long as the main farm is located kind of over on this side of the valley, I'm probably always going to take it to pheasant pluckers. I think the potato, you know, if you ever plant potatoes, you would take it to pheasant pluckers. There, interestingly enough, you know, when I was looking at the map, I think the modifier that OS put in there was a factor of 1.2, meaning take the base price in the game and multiply it by 1.2. Almost every other one that he has in there is reduced in some ways. You know, like I say, this is a tough map, and he's kind of depressed the pricing on a lot of these just to make it tougher. Trying to think if there's any other variables. You know, I'm sure there's variables, you know, that would come into play if we had the a soil mod installed, which we currently don't. So there you may have, I really haven't studied it in depth yet, but there probably is, and those that know about it can probably say in the comments, but I'm sure there's different requirements for the different crops. I think I remember too, and I don't know if Farm Sim 15 had this. I kind of think it skipped over, but there was this mod, I know I've mentioned it previously, the more realistic mod, that I think also tackled some of these concepts. You know, one of the things I've heard, for example, in Farm Sim is the weights put to hauling certain stuff is about half what it should be in real life, give or take. And something like in other words, if you have a full load of grain and it's supposed to weigh, well, I probably shouldn't even throw out numbers, I don't know. But let's say you got a trailer load and you, in real life, would have, you know, 10 tons loaded. In game, the game is only going to treat it as if it's 5 tons. I think I almost remember seeing the math on this in some scripts for Farm Sim 17 when I was studying those once upon a time. So I don't know if that holds accurate for 15. But suffice it to say, the game intends you to have a lighter feeling trailer than what would actually be there in real life. Well, as things like the more realistic mod kind of came along and changed that to be something closer to its real weight. Alright, I'm going to head downhill. Got one more to do. I already know I don't have the right crops planted in all my other fields, so I'm going to just go ahead and plunk barley down in this last field over here, and I'm going to hope the price holds. I kind of came to some interesting conclusions on this, and I'll show it later just for sake of discussion. And I am almost out of sauce. But you know what? I think I may make it. One more field. So anyway, the more realistic mod came in and helped with these things, you know, whether it was weights of the particular commodities that you would be carrying, and there was just oodles of things in that particular mod to make things have a more realistic feel. You know, like right now I'm driving this tractor around. It's very responsive, very snappy going around a corner. But the truth of the matter is, you know, it's pulling something that's a little bit, it's beyond what its capacity would be. You know, so with the more realistic mod installed, if there was such a thing for 15, you know, I wouldn't even be able to pull this planter probably. So it just fixed things with response, you know, in the vehicles to kind of like the mod is named, make it more realistic. And if something wasn't designed to pull a certain size plow, well, you couldn't pull it. So I think the more realistic mod kind of came in at Farm Sim 11, then it continued into 13, it skipped over 15. There may have been kind of a light version that someone put together, don't remember who. Maybe it was a guy by the name of Base Addict, He was someone on the forum of FSUK back in the day, and I think he went on to become an employee of the Giants, actually, the maker of the game. But I almost seem to recall some posts on FSUK where he was working on a light version of MR, but it could be I'm not remembering that correctly. But then in 17, I think the main modder for the more realistic mod returned to the scene and did a version for 17. And I wish I could remember his name, and I just don't. I apologize for that. But after 17, I don't think it's been done since, and maybe as the game generations have gone, the physics have improved a little, maybe, but I don't know. I've played 19, and I've done a little in 22, and some of it's kind of the same old, when it comes to that. But all that to say, MR, or more realistic, also had features that impacted crops. I don't know about prices. Not only the weights, but also I believe he impacted yields, so that those would be closer to for realism. He also did things like, we put seed in here, and then we turn it into whatever crop we want. If we want to plant canola, we turn it into canola. If we want to do a wheat, we hit the toggle until it says wheat. We don't have to change the literal seed that is inside the planter. In real life, if we wanted to change crops, of course, we'd have to pull off the field and vacuum the thing out, and in other words, we would either lose all that seed or we'd have to get it out of there. So I understand, in more realistic, I think what he did is if you chose, after you filled the seeder, to change the type of seed that it was, what it would do is it would empty the seeder out. So all that seed you had purchased, it would make it disappear. And I remember some people being kind of upset about that. But I think I remember some posts by him, he just said, hey, this is more realistic. Don't like it tough. So if we had the add mod on here, like I say, there wasn't a version for 15. The add would also impact our crop economics. Soil mod would. Previously we visited about the seasons mod that came into vogue kind of in the 17 version as the game kind of changed, in the Lua coding. I think it made it more adaptable for it. And I think there were things in the seasons mod, that could impact crops. And especially so as it continued into 19, where they added moisture and susceptibility to frost. I think there was crop rotation was introduced, which was a pretty cool feature. All of these things that would have an impact on economics. Furthermore, I think in 19, there was a mod, I think, that came through the Giants. I don't know if they did the coding, but what was it called? It's where you can look at a crop map and you can tell, when you apply fertilizer or lime, you pull a soil sample to see if it's needed in a particular area. If it needs more, it applies more. If it needs less, it doesn't put on as much, all that kind of thing. For whether it's weeds or fertilizer or lime, all those things they introduced in 19, you could pinpoint more what was needed where. That also would impact your economics and all that sort of thing. And I don't know Farm Sim 22 enough, but to know what they may have added there. But back here in Farm Sim 15, where you're basically running just with the base game itself, I don't think I have anything in here that modifies yields. I know there were some mods out there, that would just boost yields for whatever reason, maybe just on general principles. But I don't have anything in here. So all that to say, for 15 minutes of blabbing on, I ran a script to kind of see what the game tables would tell me as to what each commodity's worth, how much, oh, yippee, we are done planting. And how much would be harvestable. Try to pick out what variables I could and determine which ones would change depending on the commodity. And really, the only one that changes is the amount of seed required. So I'm going to come give him some sauce. There we go. There we go. That's a thirsty tractor. I think we managed to plant the whole place on a single tank. Well, I think we planted the whole place. Maybe before I give up the cedar, I should take a look. Yes, looking down through here, I think all my fields, any of these that have green, I believe we are done, folks. Yep, even little 19 is planted. What I really regret planting, if I can be frank, is all the canola. I was really surprised when I went through the tables, and we'll see those here in a moment. And I'll show you what I was looking at. But I didn't realize just how low of a value rape has. And I'd be curious to know, we don't have canola in the area where I live. I know there's quite a bit farmed in the UK, maybe other regions of the area where or other regions of the state where I live. I think there may be some. But I'd be curious in real life if it's really not as valuable, say, as barley. I wish I'd planted everything barley at the very least. And furthermore, when we see it, even barley isn't going to cut it. I maybe should have planted the whole place in corn of all things to chop for silage. Even though silage has been tremendously devalued in this map, when I run the numbers, on average, silage I think is still going to beat almost everything. And it goes to show you, even though he is really limited. I mean, when I say really limited, he's like put it at 15% of its normal value. And even though it's been knocked back so far, it still is a good money maker. And it goes to show you that if he didn't have that limit in there, just why silage was such a valuable commodity to a lot of people, or a good money maker in a farming simulator. But according to this, I appear to be all planted. So, oh, yeah, didn't finish filling. I almost ran it out of seed, but I think what this means is I can turn back my planter, and I am just further in the hole. So let me see here. How did I do that? Yeah, I think it was in here. I'll go find... Oh, did I scroll by it? I must be blind as a bat. Okay, here we go. Return vehicle. Yeah, it's going to charge me a little bit. Oh, well, look at this. You know what? I haven't noticed that before. I guess when you turn something back, well, that's kind of generous. They're going to pay you for the seed. Or maybe it's a partial payment. I don't even remember how much I had in it, but they're giving me 374 back. Well, hey now. That's right generous. Okay, so we'll return it. And the next thing I am going to need... Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I have one already. Do I already have a fertilizer spreader? I guess I didn't look in here. I frankly can't remember, even if this is my 70-something episode. Nope, I don't see it, so I'm going to go grab me a... I gotta be blind as a bat. Where is it? Tip right here. Okay. I think this is the one I used. It isn't huge. I'm going to rent it. And I don't know that it takes long. Maybe 3 hours. So I am just going to zip on up to the dealership. and go get the fertilizer spreader. If I can stay on the road and not end up in the ditch. So, like I say, I gotta admit I was pretty surprised. I'm pretty sure I've run this analysis before. I just couldn't remember the results. And maybe it differs between the version. I think the last time I ran a crop analysis, it was on 17. And whenever this analysis is run, like I say, you kind of gotta be careful that you get all of the intended crop revenues that are going to come from it. So for example, if you are farming barley or wheat, you have an output of straw. So you could sell the straw, and that'll also be another revenue stream. I suppose something else that should be considered too is, what happens when you convert, your field crops into your animals. And that's something I didn't run. That's not an analysis I did. I just assumed I'm going to remain an arable farmer. They try to make a go at that. So everything I did in there I assumed was just arable. So really, for comparing wheat and barley to the rest of the crops, I figured there was straw bales, that could be sold. And then, like, for something like corn, I did the analysis twice, because there's two different things you can do with the corn. You can chop it for silage, or you can harvest it as grain. And I sure wouldn't recommend the grain route. That was one of the lowest performing, if I recall correctly, and we'll see the data in a moment. But canola was kind of a surprise. Even though it's worth more at the market on a per liter basis, overall, because there isn't straw residue before it that you can turn into a bale. Maybe there's a mod, that did that. I know in 17 you couldn't bale canola. Like I say, I don't know that much about canola, but I remember hearing from some that some farmers out there do bale canola straw. So I know there were some mods that came out on that, but I don't know if there were any for Farm Sim 15. So really, the only thing you have from canola is the canola itself to sell, and while it's at a higher price, you just don't harvest that big of a crop of it, and so by the time you run the math on all that, you end up earning less per square meter of field for your canola than you do for barley and wheat. And let's see, what else did I look at? I mean, there was also potatoes and sugar beets. Those were neck and neck, as I recall, in terms of value. The potatoes, I think, slightly edged out the sugar beets, and I don't know. In my mind, potatoes are kind of a wash. Maybe one thing that would keep them from being a total wash, if you're looking to plant that versus sugar beets, is the fact that in this map, one of the selling points overvalues potatoes. And like I say, it's the pheasant plucker location up there. I think it's because he's simulating kind of a restaurant up there, so of course they would want a good supply of fresh potatoes, so they're going to pay a little extra and say the town merchant, that's going to, I don't know, commoditize them. And I didn't really look at grass or dry grass. I suppose those could be baled and wrapped for silage. I didn't really look at them from that angle. Maybe I should have. I guess, that is one analysis that I didn't run. I would have to see what the value of silage bales off of a grass, well, either that or grass turned into bulk silage. I guess I wouldn't have to bale it and wrap it. I could convert it to silage, in a bunker over here. That would also be an option. Why am I coming here? I need to head up to the field, at least park it there, because I don't think, let me get my lights off. I do need to fill it. And maybe I'll sneak it in here. I'll just park it kind of right there, and then I'm going to bring, oh yeah, I'll bring my trusty tractor over here because I think I can fill it out of this. I'll at least get them filled before I take you to the numbers. And I gotta say all of this too. This is all on the law of averages. So if I had been a little smarter about this, I would have played this a little bit differently. Oh, now it's going to cost me some money. You obviously need to adapt for wherever the prices are in game. The game is going to do whatever it's going to do with the prices, but it always has this common starting point based on these underlying game tables, if you will, that kind of suggest the results that I just mentioned as to, which crops will be top dog. But you kind of have to adapt it to your current situation in the map, which I did. Now let me save this, and I'm gonna switch over to my text editor. I just want to show you a couple of the tables. You can, this maybe won't mean much to many people, but underlying the game, this is where the data is stored. It's called fruit util, and some of fruit util I think has some formulas in it or code, if you will, but there's a lot of variables in here that it uses to track things like crop numbers. And I didn't run this on the Gelvin Valley map, by the way. I did this on a different map. So it's going to tell you what the fruit number is for all of these, and then it's going to give you all the facts. We'll just look at one here. This one is for wheat, but it has all the data in here that the game needs to know how to handle the crop of wheat, when the player's allowed to, or what the cut state is after the player cuts it, which texture number to use, max harvesting growth state. Anyway, without going into all of these, which would be fun in its own right. Windrow liter per square meter. So when you harvest wheat, it's going to output 6 liters of straw every square meter of the field. So that's an important little tidbit. How much straw are we going to get off of a square meter? Obviously needs seeding. Liter per square meter. I think this one here says when you harvest it, how much are you going to get from the harvest per square meter? Well, it's going to be 1.2 liters of wheat. Now, whether this is the final version with fertilizer or whether this is without, I don't know. But this is kind of what its starting point is. That's going to be the name of the windrow, of course. I can't remember if there's anything else in here we need. I think that's pretty basic what we pull from here. And so this is just wheat. Number 2 is going to be barley. You'll see that barley's yield is slightly less than what wheat is, but the straw output is identical. 3 is going to be canola. So you'll see that there's nothing up here on straw, and it whacks the yield to 0.6 liters per square meter, and so forth. It's going to get into the corn and maize and everything else down here. That's where I got that part of the data. This other one, fillable, also has some functions in it, some formulas, if you will, coding that you use by the game, but it also has a massive amount of data in here on each particular item. So, we were just looking at wheat. Well, here's wheat. Here's the info on wheat as to its name, how heavy it is, and then I think this is maintaining a current price per liter. But then there's this little line right here, the starting price per liter. So the game, I think when you start up a brand new game, this is where it's going to start. And then as the game progresses, it'll alter this. And I think at this point, when I ran this table, this is kind of what the price per liter is. Now, we're not going to see it this way in game. We're going to see it, I think, per 1,000 liters. So what we would see is 288 in game, which is substantially higher than the price that we currently have on Gelvin Valley, of course. And so forth. This goes down here. Next is barley. and whatnot. And you'll see barley is priced just a fuzz higher than wheat, for starting out. And what I don't know, because the code isn't revealed, is just how the pricing algorithms work. Maybe someone out there has seen the code, but suffice it to say, wheat and barley aren't that far apart. Canola, as we go to that one, you'll see a higher price. But I gathered all these bits of data out here to make a table to kind of see which would be the best. And so I know there's a lot of data over here, but remember I mentioned there was straw, windrow, liter per square meter, harvest. This is for the straw output. This is for the grain output you would get, or in the case of potato and sugar beets, the liters per square meter. Here's how much seed it would take when you're seeding. And since the cost of seed is the same, this is all in parity. I just need to factor that out. Crop price per liter, I chose to use the beginning numbers. Maybe you recognize this from what we just saw. And then what I plugged in here was a selling modifier. This is based on Gelvin Valley itself. This is the highest selling modifier I could get for wheat. This is the highest one I could get for barley, meaning every other station had a factor that was lower than this, because this number is going to be multiplied by the price, which is in turn multiplied by the liters per square meter, or what have you. So you also have these modifiers to deal with. There was even one down here on silage. Oh, I apologize. I think I said earlier it was 15%. It's actually 20. So not quite as low as what it was. But here's what the price would be per liter of silage if it was full price. Well, you can tell that when you get this much chaff out of corn, 4.3 liters per square meter, and then you get this high of a price, that far outweighs, what you get on these others. I mean, look how low wheat is, and look how low the price is. I mean, it beats it on the totals, so you can see why chaff turned into silage was so valuable. But he had significantly whacked it here. Old Joe's farm, I think, added a 35%, but they only take a teeny tiny bit, and then I think the selling station closes. So I ran the math. Oh yeah, and this is the price for the straw when you would sell it. I assume it also fluctuates. So I figured out which were the best stations, and using the base data from the game, if there was no modifications by well, I guess it did take into account these modifications, but if it was the game was starting out, that's the red output here. Basically, this is the revenue per square meter. So that's multiplying some variables together. This is secondary crop revenue, meaning if you have straw bales, that's what the revenue is per square meter. Here's the seed cost per square meter. And I didn't factor in things like the impact of fertilizer, because the impact is constant on all of these. So as is the cost. It's just assumed that it's in there and that it'll make that difference. So here is the output or the net revenue, exclusive of the costs of your machinery, the costs of hired workers, but I figure that's all going to be somewhat the same between them, especially if it's, you're talking arable between wheat and barley. I mean, you're going to hire the combine, you'll hire other things. So if you're going to do that, and it's going to be the same for all of them, I didn't figure I needed to put that in there. I was trying to look only at the things that might move or cause variability between the crops. So here's the results. And this was the biggest shocker to me at all. I've kind of been bellyaching about the low price of wheat, and it's true. It is under barley. But in the base game itself, on this map, because of this little limiter over here, 95% on barley, wheat, on average, assuming its prices fluctuate with barley kind of in similar fashion, wheat can beat barley on average. Like I say, I regret planting all the canola. This is probably the last time I'll raise it. I for sure don't want to raise corn. These two are on the bottom of the heap. Corn is grain, that is. But at the top of the heap is still, and this here is silage. Even at the depressed 20% rate, you still earn way more than every other crop if you raise silage. Of course, you got to do a little work to produce the silage, but that's fine. This is potatoes, which is right neck and neck with silage, but still a fuzz under. And this is sugar beets, which is under even wheat up here, barley. It's sugar beets also might be a little tougher to grow, as would potatoes. You know, there's a little bit. It isn't as easy to hire, for example. I don't think on those. So really, I mean, it'd be kind of what we're doing up here is kind of the easiest thing. But like I say, this silage, I think I'm gonna give it more of a chance when I crank this game up again because and then this blue stuff is I said, okay, this is using the base game tables. What happens if I look at the game's prices right now? You know, at pheasant pluckers, wheat was 200 1,000, barley was 276 1,000. So I just took what is and I used those prices. And if I assume they're not going to change by a whole lot, you know, I think it changes every hour. That's kind of how it works. But if I make a silly assumption that it isn't going to change much between now and the next harvest, then this is probably a pretty good indicator of where the prices are going to end up. Well, then here's kind of the indication of what I should be planting. You know, here it says, hey, plant some potatoes. That's probably going to be the best. Um, and maybe I should. Maybe I should do some spuds on the flatter ground, and maybe the rest I should put in silage. Um, Even sugar beets are higher up here than what barley and wheat are. So maybe I should do some tubers and try to do some silage. But I for sure next go around I'm not going to do canola. And right now barley beats out wheat. So based on current pricing data, the decision we made in here to plant barley over wheat, I think hopefully is a good one. Although I see the wheat prices coming up. So I don't know, maybe it's boring to go over some numbers like these, but you know, I wish now that I would have kind of looked at all this before I started on Gelvin Valley. Might have saved some money in the long run. You know, I probably wouldn't have wasted so much time the first time doing all wheat and just kind of just being haphazard about it. So but I'll try to be smarter about this in the future and see kind of where this goes, and hopefully I'll get good old Gelvin Valley changed around for the better. Thank you all for watching. I'm sorry I went a little over on this one. Wish you all a good day, whatever you're doing, and I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye for now.